There comes a night in every life, a night that feels endless, when silence gets heavier than words and your own thoughts start whispering things you're not ready to hear. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering when everything started falling apart and why no one noticed. But listen closely, the night is not your enemy. The darkness that surrounds you isn't trying to swallow you. It's trying to hold you still until you remember who you are. Because the truth is, healing never happens under the sun. It happens in the quiet, in the dark, in the hours when no one is watching. The night doesn't destroy you. It rebuilds you. So don't run from it. Close your eyes. Let the silence touch your soul. Let the darkness remind you, you are not lost, you are healing. The clock had stopped ticking hours ago, but he didn't notice. Time had lost meaning inside this small, dimly lit room. A single lamp flickered in the corner, casting long shadows across the walls, shadows that seemed alive, whispering secrets of the past. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, his hands trembling slightly. The night outside was heavy, pressing against the windows like a living thing. The city noise had faded long ago. Only the faint hum of distant cars remained. A reminder that the world still moved, even if he couldn't. For the first time in years, he wasn't running. He wasn't pretending to be okay. He wasn't wearing the mask he'd built to survive the daylight. Tonight, he was just himself, a man who'd lost almost everything and didn't know how to begin again. His phone lay face down on the table, silent. No notifications, no calls, no messages. The world had gone quiet. And in that silence, Ethan met someone he had long forgotten, his own soul. It spoke softly. "You're not broken, Ethan. You're just tired." Tears formed without warning. Not loud, desperate sobs, but quiet tears that carried the weight of years. Every failure, every goodbye, every betrayal, it all echoed inside that small room like an orchestra of ghosts. And yet beneath that pain, there was something else. Something small, fragile, alive. Hope. The kind that doesn't scream or demand attention. The kind that waits patiently, quietly, in the dark. Ethan leaned back and looked up at the ceiling. "Why does it hurt so much to feel human?" he whispered. There was no answer. Only silence. And yet it felt like the silence was listening. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in months, he didn't try to fix anything. He didn't chase comfort. He didn't scroll through memories or messages or lies. He simply breathed, slowly, deeply, like the night was breathing with him. Somewhere deep within, something shifted, like a door creaking open after years of being locked. The pain was still there. The memories still burned. But there was a strange peace in finally not fighting them. Because sometimes healing doesn't begin when the pain stops. It begins when you stop running from it. Ethan didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe the same emptiness. Maybe another night like this. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. He whispered into the silence, "If this is what healing feels like, then maybe I can survive it." And somewhere beyond the walls, the night seemed to smile. Outside, a faint breeze moved through the city. It carried the sound of leaves rustling, like the soft voice of the universe saying, "Rest now. The night will heal you." The night had grown colder. The air in the room felt heavier, filled with something that wasn't quite silence, but something deeper. Ethan opened his eyes. The lamp had burned out. The room was almost completely dark, except for a sliver of moonlight slipping through the curtains. He could hear his own heartbeat. Slow, uneven, human. Somewhere between that heartbeat and the silence, he thought he heard it. A whisper. It wasn't a sound, not exactly, more like a thought that wasn't his. "You've been running for too long, Ethan." He froze. His eyes searched the shadows, but there was no one there. Just the soft hum of the night pressing closer, like it wanted to be heard. "Who's there?" he whispered. No answer. Only the sound of the wind outside brushing against the window pane. But then it came again, softer this time. You don't have to pretend anymore. Ethan's breath trembled. He closed his eyes, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination, just exhaustion playing tricks on his mind. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. The voice wasn't haunting him. It was healing him. Every time you smiled when you wanted to cry, every time you said, "I'm fine," when you were breaking, I was there watching, waiting. I never left. The words filled the room like warm air in the cold. Ethan swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he spoke into the darkness. "Who are you?" And the answer came, steady and soft. "I am the night you feared. I am the silence you ran from. I am every tear you hid, every scream you swallowed. But I am not your enemy, Ethan. I am your mirror." He felt something shift inside him, like a weight he didn't know he carried was finally being lifted. "You think the daylight heals?" the voice asked gently. "No, daylight distracts. But the night brings you home." Ethan let the tears come again, not out of weakness, but release. He whispered, "Then teach me how to stop running." The night replied, "First, forgive yourself for getting lost." He nodded slowly. The words sank into his chest like medicine. "Then stay. Stay?" Ethan asked. "Yes, stay through the silence. Stay through the loneliness. Don't escape the dark. Understand it. Every wound you've buried will speak here. Let them." For the first time, Ethan didn't resist. He let the darkness touch him, not as something cold, but as something ancient and kind. The night wasn't punishing him. It was holding him still so he could finally heal. Outside, the wind quieted. The world seemed to listen. Ethan lay down, his body sinking into the mattress. His eyes grew heavy, but his mind was clear. Just before he drifted into sleep, he heard it once more. "Rest now. Tomorrow the light will return. But tonight, let me do what I was made to do." And as he fell asleep, Ethan realized something. The voice wasn't outside him. It was him. The part of him that never gave up, waiting for him to finally listen. The next night came quietly, like a visitor who didn't want to disturb the house. The air was cool and the moon hung low, pale and tired, like it had listened to too many stories. Ethan lay awake again, but something was different tonight. The darkness didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt gentle. As his eyes grew heavier, he felt the world blur. And then suddenly, he was somewhere else. He stood barefoot on soft ground. The air smelled like rain and memory. Around him stretched a garden, endless, silent, shimmering under a silver sky. Flowers glowed faintly, each one a different color, each one pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Ethan looked around, confused but calm. "Where am I?" he whispered. The familiar voice of the night replied, "You are in your memory garden." "My what?" "The place where every moment you've ever lived still breathes." Ethan walked slowly, his fingers brushing against the glowing petals. Each touch sent a ripple through his chest. Flashes of laughter, arguments, tears, warmth. Every flower was a memory, some bright and soft, others sharp, painful, still alive, still waiting. "I didn't know they were all still here," he whispered. "Nothing inside you is ever truly gone," said the night. "You bury what you can't face, but the garden remembers everything." Ethan stopped at a dark corner where the flowers had withered. The air felt colder there. What happened to these? Those are the moments you couldn't forgive. His throat tightened. He saw faces, people he once loved, people who left, people who hurt him. And among them, his own reflection. "I tried to move on," he said softly. "I thought forgetting was healing." Forgetting isn't healing, the knight replied. It's hiding. And what you hide only grows roots deeper inside you. Ethan knelt beside a withered flower. It was gray, brittle, almost dead. He reached out, but when his fingers touched it, a vision bloomed before him. He saw himself, younger, afraid, trying to hold everything together. The pain, the guilt, the moment he gave up on himself, tears burned his eyes. I can't look at this, he said. You must, whispered the knight. To heal, you must face the parts of you that hurt the most. Ethan trembled, but he didn't turn away. What do I do now? Forgive. Forgive who? Everyone, and especially yourself. The word yourself echoed through the garden like a bell. Ethan fell to his knees, clutching the broken flower, whispering, I forgive you, I forgive me. As the words left his lips, the gray petals began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter, until they shone like dawn breaking over a quiet field. All around him, the garden stirred. The dead flowers began to bloom again, slowly, beautifully. The air filled with color, light, and warmth. Ethan stood there, tears on his face, but peace in his heart. You see, said the knight gently, healing doesn't erase your past. It transforms it. The pain becomes wisdom. The loss becomes strength. Ethan looked around at the glowing garden and smiled faintly. Then maybe my story isn't over yet. It never was, replied the knight. You just stopped believing you could write the next chapter. A soft breeze swept through the flowers, carrying his whispered words into the stars. And when Ethan opened his eyes again, he was back in his room. The lamp was still off. The city was still asleep. But inside him, something sacred had awakened. He lay back, whispering into the dark. Thank you for showing me what I needed to see. The knight answered only with silence. But this time, it was the kind of silence that heals. The morning after the dream felt different. Not brighter, not easier, just different. Ethan woke with the faint memory of the garden still lingering in his chest. He could still smell the rain, still hear the soft hum of the voice that had guided him through it. He sat up slowly, staring at the thin light slipping through the blinds. The world looked the same. Cars, buildings, noise. But inside him, something had changed. For the first time, the chaos outside didn't feel louder than the peace inside. He took a deep breath. The air felt alive. And then, without warning, came the wave. The kind of emotion that comes out of nowhere. Sadness, grief, fear. The body's last attempt to make you believe you haven't healed yet. Ethan clenched his fists, his mind whispering, Not again. I thought I was past this. But before he could fall back into the spiral, the familiar voice returned. Not from the air this time, but from inside him. Healing isn't a straight line, Ethan. It's not about never falling. It's about choosing to stand again every time you do. He exhaled. But what if I fall forever? He whispered. Then I will catch you. Ethan closed his eyes. The words hit something deep inside him, something that had always believed he was alone in the fall. You think peace is found when nothing hurts? The voice continued. But real peace is when you can sit with the hurt and still choose to stay. He thought of all the nights he'd run, from memories, from silence, from himself. And for the first time, he didn't want to run anymore. How do I stay? He asked softly. By breathing, by being, by not needing everything to make sense. That sounds impossible. Everything feels impossible before it becomes your truth. Ethan stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city was waking up. People rushed, lights flashed, horns blared, but he stayed still. He pressed his hand against the glass. The reflection looking back at him didn't feel like a stranger anymore. You're still here, he whispered to himself. And for the first time, it didn't sound like defeat. It sounded like courage. The knight's voice softened again, like a breeze across the back of his neck. You don't have to rush your healing. You don't have to fix every piece today. All you have to do is stay long enough to let love find you again, the kind that starts within. Ethan smiled faintly. "Then I'll stay," he said. "Good," whispered the night, "because staying is how the light learns where to find you." Outside, the clouds began to break, and a thin ray of sunlight slipped through his window. It touched his face, warm and quiet, a small reminder that even after the longest darkness, the light always remembers where you are. And in that simple, silent moment, Ethan realized he wasn't healed yet, but he was finally healing, and that was enough. The days began to blend together, not because Ethan was lost, but because for the first time he had stopped counting. He no longer measured his worth in progress or his peace in perfection. He had started to live slowly, by almost gently. Each morning, he would sit by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the light spill across the city. There were still moments when sadness touched him, but it didn't break him anymore. He had learned something powerful. Pain loses its power when you stop resisting it. That night, as the sky dimmed and the hum of the world softened, Ethan whispered, "Are you still here?" The familiar warmth filled the room again, that quiet, comforting presence he'd come to trust. "Always," said the night. "I think I'm learning," he said softly. "Not how to forget, but how to live with what's still here." "That's acceptance," replied the night. "It's not surrender. It's peace without condition." Ethan closed his eyes. "But how do I know when I've truly accepted something? When it stops needing to change for you to feel whole?" The words hung in the air like a soft echo. He thought about all the times he'd waited, for apologies, for closure, for the world to make sense. Every wound he'd kept open, hoping time or someone else would heal it. "So healing isn't fixing?" he asked. "No," the night said. "It's understanding. It's saying, this too was part of me, and I survived it." Ethan let those words sink deep. They didn't erase the pain, but they made space for it, like a guest who no longer needed to be feared. He spoke quietly. "I forgive the world for not being gentle with me." And the night replied, "Now forgive yourself for expecting it to be." He smiled, a slow, tired, genuine smile, the kind that comes from finally seeing the truth without running from it. "You know," he said, "I used to think acceptance meant giving up." "It doesn't," said the night. "It means breathing in the storm and realizing you're still standing." A soft breeze moved through the open window. It carried the scent of rain, clean, new, alive. Ethan whispered into the darkness, "I don't hate the night anymore." "You never did," came the reply. "You only feared what it would show you." He looked out at the moon, glowing pale against the quiet city skyline. "It's strange," he said. "I spent years searching for happiness. But peace feels different. It doesn't shout. It just sits beside you, waiting for you to notice." "Exactly," said the night. "Peace doesn't arrive when life is perfect. It arrives when you stop needing perfection." Ethan nodded slowly. He understood. It wasn't about light defeating darkness. It was about learning to live where both exist, where loss meets love and grief meets gratitude. He whispered, "I think I can live like that." "You already are," said the night gently. Outside, a soft drizzle began to fall, tiny silver drops catching the light of the moon. Ethan lay back, listening to the rain tap against his window. Each drop sounded like a heartbeat, a reminder that everything was still alive, still moving, still forgiving. And as his eyes began to close, he heard the night's final words for the evening. "Rest now, Ethan. You are not behind. You are becoming." The rain sang him to sleep. The darkness held him softly. And somewhere between the falling drops and his slowing breath, Ethan smiled. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for tomorrow to save him. He had finally learned how to save himself. Morning came quietly the way forgiveness does, not with a shout but a whisper. Ethan woke to the smell of sunlight on old wood, the kind of warmth that touches you before you open your eyes. For the first time in years, he didn't dread the morning. The day didn't feel like something to survive anymore. It felt like something to meet. He sat up slowly, his eyes catching the first pale light of dawn spilling across his room. Dust particles floated in the beam like tiny stars, proof that even in daylight, fragments of the night still lingered. He smiled. "You're still here?" he said softly. And the voice, that gentle, endless voice, answered from somewhere deep within. "I never leave, Ethan. Light and I, we share the same home." Ethan stood by the window, watching the city awaken. Cars moved, birds called, and the hum of life rose again, but he didn't feel lost in it. "I always thought the night was my enemy," he whispered. "That it was the opposite of light." "That's what you were taught," said the night's voice, softer now, almost blending with the air. "But light isn't the opposite of darkness. It's its partner." Ethan frowned slightly. "Partner?" "Yes, one reveals what the other hides. One teaches you to see. The other teaches you to feel." He took a deep breath, his eyes following the sunlight as it painted the walls gold. "So without the dark, there's no understanding of the light?" "Exactly," the voice replied. "If you lived only in brightness, you'd never learn to rest, never learn to listen, never learn to see yourself clearly." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then maybe I needed both." "You did," the night said. "Everyone does. You can't grow without darkness, and you can't bloom without light." He looked at his reflection in the window. Not the broken man he used to see, but someone quietly becoming whole. "All this time," he whispered, "I kept waiting for the light to save me. And now?" "Now I think it was the night that did." The silence that followed was deep, peaceful, like a gentle hand on his shoulder. "The night didn't save you, Ethan," came the voice. "It showed you how to save yourself." Ethan closed his eyes and breathed in the sunlight. It didn't blind him this time. It warmed him. He walked to his small desk where a notebook lay unopened for months. He sat down, picked up a pen, and began to write. Not to escape the darkness, but to honor it. Words poured out of him like light through a crack. "I am both the night and the morning. I am what I've lost and what I've found. I am not fixed. I am free." A tear slid down his cheek, but it wasn't a tear of pain. It was gratitude. "You've learned," the night whispered softly, fading into the light. "And that means I can rest now. Will I hear you again?" Ethan asked. "Always," came the reply, distant but eternal. "Every time you close your eyes and breathe, I'll be there, reminding you that healing doesn't end when the sun rises." Ethan smiled, watching the light fill his room completely. He didn't rush to do anything. He didn't plan or fix or chase. He just sat there, quiet, alive, at peace. And for the first time, he understood. The night had healed him not by changing his life, but by teaching him to live through it. The morning light drifted softly across Ethan's face. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm. Doors opening, engines starting, people moving fast towards something they might never find. But Ethan didn't move. He sat still listening. Not to the city, not to the noise, but to something quieter. His own heartbeat. It was strange, he thought, how he'd never really heard it before. Always drowned out by thoughts, fears, plans, and endless noise. But now, it was all he could hear. A slow, steady rhythm, not perfect, but alive. Thump, pause, thump, pause. Between those beats, there was silence, a space that felt sacred, infinite. "That's where peace lives," whispered the voice of the night, soft and distant now, almost blending with his breath. "Between your heartbeats," Ethan smiled faintly. "You sound farther away than before." "Not far," said the night. "Just quieter. You don't need me to speak loudly anymore." He exhaled slowly, letting the words sink in. The quiet between heartbeats, that was where he had been running from all his life. The silence that once scared him had become his sanctuary. "Is this what healing feels like?" he asked softly. "No," said the night. "This is what living feels like without fear." Ethan closed his eyes. He could still remember the darkness, the nights that swallowed him whole, but now those memories didn't hurt. They glowed like distant stars in a calm sky. "You've learned to breathe again," said the night. "That's all healing ever asks of you, to breathe, to stay, to feel." He placed his hand over his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath his palm. "And when I forget," he whispered, "then you'll listen again. That's the beauty of it. Healing isn't lost when forgotten. It just waits for you to return." Ethan opened his eyes. The light outside was brighter now, almost golden. He felt no rush to leave, no guilt for staying. For the first time, he realized that peace didn't arrive when life got easy. It arrived when he stopped needing everything to be different. He whispered to himself, "I am not the pain that shaped me. I am the space that held it and chose not to close." The room around him seemed to breathe with him. Every sound, the soft hum of the world, the rustle of wind through the curtains, felt connected to his heartbeat. "You've come home," said the night, now just a whisper carried by the air. "Home?" Ethan asked softly. "Yes, to yourself. To the place you were always meant to return." Ethan smiled, eyes glistening. "Then, I guess I'll stay." "You already are," said the voice, fading gently into silence. The sound of the world continued outside, horns, footsteps, conversations. But inside Ethan's small apartment, there was a stillness that felt eternal. He wasn't escaping life anymore. He was finally living it, one quiet heartbeat at a time. The city felt different now, not quieter, not slower, but clearer. Ethan walked through the morning streets, coffee in hand, the hum of life buzzing all around him. Yet, for the first time, he didn't feel like he was fighting against the noise. He was part of it. The traffic, the chatter, the rush. Everything that used to exhaust him now felt like rhythm, like a song he had finally learned to dance to. He didn't need silence anymore to feel peace. He carried it inside him. "The world doesn't have to quiet down for you to be calm," the voice of the night whispered faintly within him. "You are the calm." He smiled, taking a slow sip of his drink. The morning air brushed his skin, cool and alive. People bumped into him, cars honked, a street musician played a tune out of key. And still, Ethan's heart stayed steady. He realized something profound. Healing hadn't made the world softer. It had made him stronger. A small child ran past him, laughing, chasing a red balloon. The sound of that laughter, pure, simple, untamed, hit something deep inside him. That's what life is, he thought. Not perfection, just motion, just moments. He stopped at a park bench and sat down. A few feet away, an old man was feeding pigeons, humming to himself. The sunlight hit the man's wrinkled face, and for a moment, Ethan could swear he saw peace. The same peace he felt inside. "You see it now," said the night's voice softly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, it's everywhere, isn't it?" "Always has been." "You just had to slow down enough to notice." He looked up at the sky. The light had changed, brighter but not harsh. It felt familiar. Like an old friend returning after a long journey. "I used to think light was something I had to chase," he said. You never had to chase it, the knight replied. You only had to stop running from yourself. Ethan took another deep breath and smiled. I think I understand now. The light isn't something outside me. It's what's left when I stop hiding. Exactly, said the voice, almost like a sigh of contentment. The night taught you how to see in the dark, so you'd never fear the light again. Ethan's phone buzzed. A message from a friend he hadn't spoken to in months. Hey, how've you been? We should catch up. He didn't hesitate. He typed back, I'd love that. Not because he was trying to fill a void, but because he finally had space to share again. He stood, stretched, and began to walk again. Every step felt light, like forgiveness beneath his feet. You're doing it, said the night gently. You're walking with the light. Ethan chuckled softly. You sound proud. I am. You stayed through the dark, and that means you can walk through anything. He passed by a storefront window and caught his reflection again. This time, he didn't just see himself. He saw the night, calm, endless, and the light, soft, alive, both looking back through the same eyes. I'm still me, he said quietly, but not the same. That's the beauty of it, whispered the voice. Healing doesn't make you someone new. It helps you finally meet who you've always been. Ethan looked around, people rushing, life happening, and he smiled again. The night inside him had turned into something beautiful. Not darkness, not light, just balance. He whispered one last time as if to an old friend, thank you. And though the voice of the night said nothing back, Ethan could feel it, warm, steady, endless, resting quietly between each of his heartbeats. The evening sun was melting into the horizon when Ethan received the message. A name flashed across his phone, one he hadn't seen in years. Can we talk? His breath caught. The world around him seemed to freeze. It was her, the person who had once been everything, and then, without warning, became the wound he carried the longest. For a moment, the old feelings came rushing back. The anger, the betrayal, the sadness he thought he had buried. Why now? He whispered. The night inside him stirred softly, its familiar calm spreading through his chest. Because forgiveness waits until you are ready, it said gently. And tonight you are. Ethan sat there staring at the screen. His fingers trembled. He could ignore it. He could pretend he never saw it. But he had spent too many years pretending. He typed, yes, let's talk. Hours later, they met at a small cafe. The same city, the same noise, but everything felt different. Slower, quieter, softer. She looked older, but still familiar. Like a memory that never really faded. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, but not cruel. Finally, she said, you look peaceful. Ethan smiled faintly. I think I finally am. I didn't expect you to say yes, she admitted. I almost didn't, he said honestly. But then I realized the part of me that still hurt was the part that hadn't listened yet. She nodded slowly. I didn't come to justify anything. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. Her voice cracked, small, trembling, real. Ethan looked at her, not as the person who broke him, but as another soul trying to make peace with her own story. You waited years for this apology, whispered the night inside him. Now ask yourself, do you still need it? Ethan smiled sadly. You don't owe me anything, he said softly. We both did what we could with what we knew then. Tears shimmered in her eyes. You've changed. No, Ethan said. I just stopped living in the version of me that was still hurting. They sat in silence again, but this time it was gentle, like the pause between waves. He realized something then. Forgiveness wasn't a gift for her. It was a door for him. The door that had been locked for years finally opened, and on the other side was peace. Quiet, patient, waiting all along. So this is what freedom feels like, he thought. The night whispered, "Freedom doesn't mean forgetting, Ethan. It means remembering without pain." They talked for hours, not about the past, but about everything in between. The spaces, the silences, the lessons. When they finally stood to leave, she said softly, "I hope you find someone who loves you right." Ethan smiled. "I already did. I found myself." She laughed quietly, tears still on her cheeks. "You sound like a different person." "No," he said gently. "Just a whole one." As she walked away, Ethan didn't feel the weight of loss. He felt something else, something cleaner, lighter. It wasn't the end of a chapter. It was the closing of a wound. He whispered into the evening air, "Thank you for coming back just so I could let go." And as he walked home, the night moved beside him, silent and steady. "You've done what most can't," it said. "You've forgiven without needing to forget." Ethan looked up at the stars, now scattered like silver sparks above the city. "I think I finally understand," he said softly. "And what's that?" the night asked. "That love and forgiveness are the same thing. One just begins where the other ends." The night didn't reply. It didn't need to. The quiet itself was the answer. The next morning came quietly. No thunder, no revelation, no fanfare. Just sunlight spilling through the window and the soft sound of the city beginning its day. Ethan sat at his desk, notebook open. The same notebook that had once been filled with half-written thoughts, pain disguised as poetry, and questions with no answers. But today the page was blank, and for the first time that didn't scare him. He held his pen for a long while, not to write but to feel the weight of it. So this is it, he thought. The part where I begin again. The night's voice, now soft, almost like a memory, stirred gently inside him. "Every story deserves a rewrite," it said. "Even yours," Ethan smiled. "But how do I start?" "Not by erasing," said the night. "By re-seeing." "Re-seeing?" "Yes, look at every scar, every loss, every mistake. Not as a wound, but as a word. Together they spell your becoming." Ethan nodded slowly. He began to write. Not a story about what happened to him, but a story about what grew from it. He wrote about nights that didn't break him, but taught him how to bend. About the people who left, and how their absence made space for peace. About fear, and how it wasn't a wall but a doorway. Hours passed, but time didn't feel heavy. It flowed around him like music. The words filled the page like light spilling through cracks, imperfect, honest, alive. "You see," the night whispered, "you were never meant to erase your story. You were meant to tell it from the other side." Ethan paused, his pen hovering above the page. "I used to hate my story," he admitted. "That's because you were still living in the middle of it," said the voice. "But now, you can see the ending, and the ending changes everything." Ethan leaned back in his chair, the sunlight warming his face. "So this is what freedom feels like," he whispered. "Yes," said the night. "The moment you stop letting your past be your prison and start letting it be your teacher." He looked down at his notebook again. The words weren't perfect. Some were messy, some uncertain, but they were his. Every line was proof that he had lived and loved and learned. He turned the page and wrote one last sentence, slowly, carefully. The night didn't end when the sun rose. It just changed form. He smiled. Outside, a breeze moved through the open window, carrying the scent of morning. "You did it," said the night softly. "You turned your pain into language." "No," Ethan said, closing the notebook gently. "I turned it into peace." "Exactly." The voice faded again, not gone, just quieter, resting somewhere deep in his chest. Ethan stood, stretched, and looked out the window. The world hadn't changed, but he had, and that made all the difference. He whispered one last thing to the air, to the night, to himself. I am no longer afraid of the dark, because I finally know it was never empty. The wind brushed his face like an old friend's hand, and for the first time, Ethan didn't feel like he was healing. He felt whole. The days passed softly, like pages turning in a book he no longer needed to rush through. Ethan had stopped counting time. Every sunrise felt like a continuation, not a beginning. He still woke early. Same chair by the window, same cup of coffee. But there was something new in his mornings now. Purpose. It wasn't loud. It didn't demand attention. It was quiet, steady, like a candle burning without fear of running out. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Ethan noticed a woman sitting alone on a bench, her face buried in her hands. People passed by without looking, but he stopped. For a moment, he saw himself, the version of him who once sat in that same posture, believing no one noticed his pain. He hesitated, then walked closer. Hey, he said gently. Are you okay? She didn't look up. I'm fine, she muttered. The same words he used to say. Ethan smiled faintly. You don't have to be. She lifted her head slowly, eyes red, her voice small. You don't even know me. You're right, he said softly. But I know what this feels like. For a while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was familiar. Then Ethan said, Sometimes the night doesn't come to hurt you. It comes to help you rest. She frowned slightly. What? It's something someone once told me, he said. When you're tired of running, the night will teach you how to stop. She looked at him. Really looked. You talk like someone who's been through it. Ethan chuckled softly. You could say that. The woman wiped her eyes. So, does it ever stop hurting? He thought for a moment. No, but it stops controlling you. She nodded slowly, a small light flickering behind her tired eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Ethan smiled. You don't owe me anything. Just promise me one thing. What's that? When you feel alone, remember, the night isn't empty. It's full of everything you're becoming. She blinked, and for the first time, smiled back. As Ethan walked away, he could feel it, that quiet warmth inside his chest. Not pride, not relief, something deeper. This is how healing grows, whispered the night's voice from within. It spreads. You give it away, and somehow you get more of it, he nodded. So peace isn't just for me? No, said the night. It's a gift you pass on. One conversation, one kindness at a time. Ethan watched the sun dip below the trees, the light scattering like liquid gold across the park. The shadows lengthened, but they didn't feel lonely anymore. You know, he said quietly, I used to think healing meant becoming untouchable, like nothing could hurt me again. And now, asked the night, now I know it means the opposite. It means feeling everything and still choosing to stay open. Exactly, whispered the voice. The strongest hearts are the softest ones. Ethan walked home under the fading light, his heart steady and full. Every person he passed, every stranger, every tired soul, felt connected to his journey somehow. Because the night had healed him, and now he was becoming the night, the quiet comfort in someone else's storm. It was raining that night, the soft kind of rain that feels like a lullaby. The city lights blurred behind a curtain of silver, and Ethan stood by his window watching the droplets race down the glass. He used to feel lonely on nights like this, but tonight the silence felt full of something he couldn't quite name. The world was breathing, and he was breathing with it. You feel it now, don't you? The night's voice murmured gently inside him. Feel what? The thread. Thread? Ethan smiled. You're being poetic again. Always, the knight teased softly. The thread that connects everything, you, me, them, all of us. Ethan looked out at the rain-soaked streets below. People hurried with umbrellas, cars splashed through puddles, a child laughed while chasing reflections in the water. Life, messy, loud, imperfect, yet beautifully alive. I think I get it, he said. We're all walking through the same storm, aren't we? Exactly, said the knight. Different umbrellas. Same rain, Ethan chuckled quietly. So what's the point of all this then? All the pain, all the loss? Connection, said the knight. Every wound you've ever carried taught you empathy. Every ache made you softer. Every goodbye taught you how to see others' loneliness and reach for it. He thought of the woman in the park, of strangers he had smiled at, of conversations that used to scare him but now felt sacred. So we heal each other? He asked. Always. You're not meant to carry light alone. You pass it on, and in doing so, you become infinite. Ethan leaned his forehead against the cool glass. Infinite? He repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Yes, whispered the knight. Because light doesn't end where you stop shining. It travels from heart to heart, from soul to soul. He watched a young couple cross the street, holding hands beneath a single umbrella. They'll fight, Ethan murmured. They'll hurt, they'll heal. And in that cycle, said the knight, they'll become who they're meant to be. Ethan closed his eyes. I used to think healing was about fixing myself. And now? Now I know it's about understanding that we were never broken, just unfinished. The knight smiled through the rain. That's the truth, Ethan. Every soul you meet is a chapter of your story. Every act of kindness you give away is a sentence that will echo in someone else's life. Ethan whispered. Then I'll keep writing. Good, said the knight. Because the story doesn't end when you heal. It begins when you help someone else believe they can too. He turned from the window and picked up his notebook. This time he didn't write about himself. He wrote about them, the people who had crossed his path, who had taught him love, loss, courage, and patience. And with every word he could feel it, that invisible thread stretching outward, connecting him to everything alive. When he finally set his pen down, the knight whispered one last thing. Now you understand. Healing is not a destination. It's a bridge, built from every soul you've ever touched. Ethan smiled softly. And you were right, he whispered. The knight really did heal me. No, the voice said gently. You healed because you stopped trying to be the light and started being human. Ethan laughed quietly, tears forming in his eyes. He looked out at the rain one last time, the droplets still falling endlessly, beautifully, and whispered, We're all part of the same storm. And that's enough. The rain fell harder. The lights glowed warmer. And somewhere deep inside the sound of the night, peace was still writing itself into every heartbeat. The seasons began to shift. The summer air grew softer, carrying the scent of new beginnings. Ethan's life no longer felt like a recovery. It felt like a rhythm. He still had his quiet mornings, his notebooks, his coffee, his walks, but now every simple thing had meaning. People began to notice something about him. Not his words, not his success, but the calm he carried. Wherever he went, a friend's house, a crowded street, a small cafe, people seemed to breathe easier when he was there. They didn't know his story. They didn't know the nights he'd survived. They just knew that near him, the noise of life felt softer. One evening, a younger colleague at work approached him. Ethan, she said hesitantly, you always seem so peaceful. How do you do it? He smiled. I don't fight the noise anymore. What do you mean? She asked. For a long time, he said, I thought peace was about controlling life, keeping everything quiet, perfect, predictable. But peace isn't control, it's surrender. It's knowing that even in the noise, you're safe. She nodded, a little unsure, but something in his voice stayed with her. That night, Ethan walked home under a violet sky. The stars were faint, scattered like whispers. "You're teaching now," said the voice of the night softly within him. "Am I?" Ethan smiled. "I don't feel like I'm teaching anyone." "You are," the night said. "Not through words, through presence. You've become the calm you once searched for." Ethan paused beneath a streetlight, its glow warm against the dark. "So that's what this is?" he asked. "Becoming a guide?" "Not a guide," the night whispered. "A reminder. You remind people that peace is possible, because you are living proof." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs. "It's strange," he said. "I used to think I had to talk about healing to help people. And now you know that sometimes silence says everything." "Exactly." He smiled, remembering the woman from the park, the conversations with strangers, the quiet moments that changed everything. The night continued. "You see, Ethan, not everyone will understand your story, but they will feel your energy. The peace you found within yourself becomes a language they recognize." He nodded slowly. "So this is what healing gives back. Presence." "Yes," said the night. "And presence is love without words." Ethan continued walking, the sound of his footsteps blending with the heartbeat of the city. He passed a young man sitting on the sidewalk, lost in thought. Their eyes met for a second, and in that second, something passed between them. Not pity, not advice, just recognition. The quiet message was simple: "I see you. You're not alone." The man smiled faintly. Ethan smiled back, and they both kept walking. Two souls, different stories, same light. "You're doing it again," the night said gently. "Doing what?" "Healing the world without trying." Ethan laughed softly. "That sounds impossible." "It always does, until someone like you makes it look effortless." He looked up at the sky again. Endless, dark, familiar. "You know," he said, "I used to be afraid of this darkness. And now? Now it feels like home." "That's because you finally became part of it," the night whispered. "And now, wherever you go, the light follows." Ethan closed his eyes and smiled. In that moment, he understood what the night had been teaching him all along. Healing wasn't about becoming untouched by pain. It was about becoming untouchable by despair. And in his quiet heart, he heard the night say one last thing before fading into silence. "You are the proof that peace survives." The night had returned, quiet, silver, endless. But this time it felt different. Ethan sat by the window again, his notebook closed, the world asleep. There was no restlessness in him now, only stillness, like the air before dawn. He closed his eyes, and the voice came, soft and familiar. "You've walked far, Ethan." He smiled faintly. "I have, but something still feels unfinished." "It is," said the voice. "The last lesson." "The last?" "Yes, you've learned to face pain, to forgive, to accept, to share light. But now you must see who I really am." Ethan's breath slowed. The room seemed to fade, walls, air, time, until all that remained was silence. "Who are you?" he whispered. And the voice said, "I am you." Ethan's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "I am the part of you that never broke. The stillness that waited when your mind screamed. The quiet that held you when you thought you were alone." The darkness around him shifted. Not cold, not empty, but alive. It shimmered faintly like breath turning into light. "I was never the night outside your window," the voice continued. "I was the night inside your soul." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. All this time, he had thought the night was something cosmic, something beyond him, guiding him. But it was him, the truest, deepest version of himself, patient and eternal. So all along I was talking to myself? To your higher self, the voice said gently. To the part of you that remembers what your human heart forgets. Ethan's voice trembled. Then why did you sound separate? Because you needed to hear it that way. Why? Because sometimes the truth has to wear another voice before we can believe it. He lowered his head, tears slipping down his cheeks, not of sadness, but of understanding. Every time you said the night healed me, the voice whispered, you were really saying, I healed me. Ethan placed a hand on his chest. Beneath his palm, his heartbeat echoed slow and steady like a drum of life. Then, the night was never my savior. No, said the voice. It was your mirror. The words hit him like a wave of warmth. He could feel it. Every memory, every tear, every quiet conversation, all of it folding back into him, completing the circle. He whispered, so this is who I am. Yes, said the voice. You are the darkness and the light, the silence and the song. You are every piece of the universe that ever tried to find itself. Ethan took a deep breath. And you'll stay with me? I never left, the voice said, fading softer now. Because I am what you've always been. The room brightened slightly, not from sunlight, but from something within him. A glow, faint but pure, spread from his chest outward, quiet, steady, alive. He looked at his reflection in the glass. For the first time, he didn't just see a man. He saw a soul that had walked through darkness not to escape it, but to remember that it was made of stars. The night whispered one final truth before dissolving completely into his heart. The light you searched for was never lost. Ethan, it was only waiting for you to open your eyes. And when he did, the world outside was no longer divided into day and night. It was one, whole, infinite, and at peace. The morning came quietly, not as an event, but as a realization. There was no golden sky, no dramatic sunrise, only light, soft, steady, alive, spilling into Ethan's room like a familiar friend returning home. He stood by the window, the same place where his story had begun, and smiled. For the first time, the light didn't feel like a stranger. It felt like a memory. The night was gone, but its voice lived in him, not in words, but in presence. You are the dawn, it had once whispered. Ethan finally understood what that meant. It wasn't about waiting for light to find him. It was about being the light that others could find. He stepped outside, barefoot, the ground cool beneath his feet. The city was waking up, engines starting, doors opening, life resuming. But everything looked softer now. He watched the sunlight touch the tops of buildings and trees, and he realized the world didn't need to change for him to feel peace. He had changed, and that changed everything. Ethan closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The air tasted like renewal. Inside his chest, the familiar stillness of the night pulsed gently. Not silence anymore, but balance. You did it, he whispered to himself. No, came the answer from within. We did it, he smiled. So what now? Now, said the voice. You live, you walk, you love, you listen. You let every sunrise remind you. You were never waiting for the light. You were waiting to remember you are it. Ethan opened his eyes. The sun had risen higher now, painting the city gold. He looked down at his shadow stretching long before him and laughed softly. "Even light needs its shadow," he said. "Exactly," whispered the voice. "That's how you know you exist." He started walking. No destination, no reason, no rush. Just movement, just presence. As he walked, he noticed things he'd never seen before. The sound of a bird's wings cutting through air, the reflection of the sky in a puddle, a child's laughter bouncing off walls like sunlight. Every small thing felt alive and sacred. He realized this was what heaven must feel like, not a place, but a perception. "The light was never above you," said the voice. "It was always within you, waiting to be seen through your eyes." Ethan paused, hand over his heart. "Then the night didn't end," he said softly. "It just changed shape." The voice smiled inside him. He could feel it. "Yes, the night became the dawn, and you became both." He laughed quietly, tears stinging his eyes, not from sadness but gratitude. "I understand now," he whispered. "Healing isn't about becoming new. It's about remembering what's eternal." The sunlight touched his face, warm and forgiving. "Then remember this," said the night's fading voice. "Whenever you forget, close your eyes, and I'll be there. Not to remind you who I am, but to remind you who you are." Ethan nodded. "I'll never forget." "You will," said the voice gently. "And that's okay, because forgetting is how remembering begins again." Ethan smiled, wiping a tear from his cheek. The world glowed brighter around him. Every sound, every breath, every moment humming with quiet divinity. He looked at the horizon, not at the sun, but at everything it touched, and whispered, "The night will heal you, but the dawn will set you free." The road back home felt longer than he remembered. The train hummed softly beneath him, carrying him through miles of countryside, golden fields, silent rivers, and distant mountains that seemed to breathe under the morning sun. Ethan watched it all pass through the window, the reflection of his face overlaying the landscape. He hadn't been back in years. The last time he saw that town, he had left it in anger, with promises never to return. But time has a way of changing the meaning of distance. "Are you ready?" The voice of the night whispered gently from within. "I think so," Ethan said. "But it feels strange, going back to where everything broke." "Nothing breaks forever," the voice said. "Some things just pause until you're strong enough to carry them again." He smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'm ready to carry." When he arrived, the town looked smaller. The same streets, same cafe on the corner, same trees leaning toward the road like they'd been waiting. But it wasn't the town that had changed, it was him. He walked slowly through the familiar lanes, each corner whispering memories. The laughter of friends, the goodbyes that hurt, the nights that felt endless. He stopped outside a small weathered house. The paint had faded, the porch creaked, but the air still smelled like rain and childhood. It was his parents' home, the place where he had first learned to dream and first learned what pain was. Ethan hesitated. His hand hovered over the door. His heart thudded once, heavy, alive. "You can go in," whispered the night softly. "What if I'm not ready?" "You are. Healing doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means you can walk into it without fear." He took a breath and stepped inside. The room smelled of old wood and time. The furniture stood exactly where it had always been, as if waiting. On the table lay a framed photo. Him and his father, both smiling, both unaware of the storms that would come. He picked it up, his thumb tracing the dust-covered glass. "Hey, Dad," he whispered. There was no answer, just the quiet hum of memory. "You used to think love and pain couldn't live in the same house," said the voice. "But they can. They always have." Ethan smiled through tears. He wasn't perfect. Neither was I. "And that's why you were both human," the voice replied. He sat down on the old couch and closed his eyes. Every echo of the past, every fight, every silence replayed, but softer now, almost tender. "I forgive you," he said aloud, his voice breaking, "for not knowing how to love me when I needed it most." The air in the room seemed to shift, as if the walls themselves had been holding their breath. "And now?" asked the night. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Now I forgive myself for needing that love so badly." The photo frame felt warm in his hands. For a moment, he imagined his father sitting beside him, smiling, proud, peaceful. "You did good, son," that imagined voice said. "You stayed." Ethan nodded, tears spilling down freely. The night whispered softly, "The past doesn't vanish when you heal. It learns to live with you, quietly, without hurting." Outside, the sky shifted, the first golden light of evening spreading across the trees. Ethan stood and walked to the door. Before leaving, he looked back once more at the empty room and smiled. "Goodbye," he whispered, "and thank you for everything that made me who I am." As he stepped outside, a breeze brushed his face, gentle, familiar, almost like an embrace. He smiled at the sky, whispering, "I came home to forgive, and I'm leaving free." The blank page stared back at him, quiet, patient, waiting. Ethan sat at his desk, a cup of coffee beside him gone cold hours ago. The world outside was asleep, the same way it was that first night long ago when the silence had terrified him. But tonight, the silence was his friend. He lifted the pen, his fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from reverence. "All right," he whispered, "let's tell the story." He didn't plan it. He didn't outline chapters or structure paragraphs. He simply remembered. The pain, the darkness, the voice that came from nowhere and saved him by teaching him to save himself. The words poured out of him, not as explanations, but as confessions. Every sentence felt like breathing after years of holding it in. "You were never writing a book," the voice of the night said softly within him. "You were letting go." He smiled faintly. "It feels heavy?" "It should," said the voice. "The truth always does." Hours passed. The pages filled. The clock ticked quietly, marking the rhythm of release. Sometimes he stopped, when the words hurt too much, when the memories pressed too close. But every time he wanted to walk away, the same whisper came, "Don't stop now. You've carried this story long enough. It's time to let it walk on its own." So he kept going. Page after page, night after night. The book wasn't perfect. Some lines bled with pain, others with forgiveness. Some pages were soaked in tears. But that was okay. Perfection wasn't the point. Truth was, one evening as he finished the final chapter, Ethan sat back, exhausted and alive. The last sentence glowed under the lamplight. "The night did not heal me by taking my pain away. It healed me by teaching me how to hold it with love." He stared at the line for a long time. Then he smiled, not because the story was over, but because it was finally free. He whispered, "It's done." "No," said the voice. "It's begun." Ethan looked out the window at the soft silver of the moon. "Do you think anyone will understand?" "They won't need to," the voice said gently. "They'll feel it. And when they do, they'll remember their own night." He nodded, closing the notebook. His heart felt lighter, not empty, but open. The next morning, he walked to a small publishing house in the city. The woman at the front desk smiled as he handed her the manuscript. "Title?" she asked. Ethan paused. Then he said softly, "The night will heal you." She typed it down, her fingers clicking like a heartbeat. "Sounds beautiful," she said. Ethan smiled. "It is." As he walked out of the office, the sunlight hit him square in the face. It didn't blind him. It blessed him. "You've given your pain a purpose," whispered the night's voice, fading like a lullaby. Ethan smiled at the sky. "No," he said softly. "I've given it wings." The book was released quietly. No spotlight, no grand event. Just a cover, a name, and a truth that had waited too long to be heard. "The Night Will Heal You" sat on shelves across the city, unnoticed at first, until one person picked it up. Then another. Then hundreds. And soon the whispers began. "You have to read this. It feels like it's talking about me. It made me cry, and I don't even know why." Ethan didn't expect any of it. He didn't write for fame. He wrote to be free. But now his freedom was setting others free too. He started getting letters, real ones, handwritten, filled with trembling ink and raw hearts. "I read your book at 3 a.m., one said, "and for the first time I didn't feel alone. You helped me forgive my father. I finally slept last night. Thank you." Ethan read every letter slowly, carefully, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, always silent. The night's voice whispered softly, "Do you see now, Ethan? The light you carried through your pain. It was never just for you." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "It's strange," he said softly. "I wrote these words to heal myself, but they're healing people I've never met. Because pain speaks a language beyond names," the voice replied, "and love translates it." One evening, he was invited to a small reading at a local library. He almost said no, he didn't like attention, but something inside whispered, "Go." So he went. The room was small, warm, filled with quiet faces. Some smiled nervously. Some looked like they hadn't slept in days. When Ethan stepped up to read, there was no stage fright, just presence. He opened the book and read, "Some nights don't come to break you. They come to rebuild what daylight destroyed." Silence filled the room. Deep, emotional silence. Then, one by one, people began to cry. Not from sadness, but from recognition. Ethan looked at them and realized every face in that crowd was another version of him. People who had walked through their own nights. People who needed someone to tell them, "It's okay to still be healing." "You're not their author," whispered the night's voice gently. "You're their mirror," he smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's what stories are, mirrors for the soul." "Exactly," said the voice. "Every story heals twice, once when it's written, and again when it's read." After the reading, a young woman approached him. Her hand shook as she held the book to her chest. "You don't know me," she said, her voice trembling, "but your book saved my life." Ethan's heart tightened. "No," he said softly, "you saved your life. I just reminded you it was worth saving." She smiled through tears. "Then thank you for reminding me." When Ethan left that night, the city lights felt different. Not brighter, but warmer. The night whispered, "You see, Ethan? You became what I always was." "What's that?" he asked. "A whisper that turns loneliness into light." He stopped on the sidewalk, looking up at the stars. "You're proud of me, aren't you?" "I always was," the voice said softly. "Even when you weren't." Ethan smiled, his eyes shimmering. The crowd's echoes still lived in him. Their tears, their hope, their voices, all blending with the one truth he had carried from the beginning. No one heals alone. And for the first time, Ethan understood. His story wasn't a conclusion. It was a bridge between one soul and another, between darkness and dawn, between silence and love. The applause had faded. The book was everywhere. People were calling him a healer, a teacher, an inspiration. But inside, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a quiet trembling. It started small, a whisper beneath his ribs, a shadow behind his peace. Then one night it grew. He woke suddenly at 2:47 a.m. His heart was pounding. The room was dark, but this time the darkness didn't comfort him. It pressed closer, heavier, familiar in the worst way. He sat up, breathing hard. "Not again," he whispered. "It's okay," came the voice of the night, faint, but still there. "You're not back where you were. You're just remembering." "Then why does it feel so real?" Ethan said. "Why does it still hurt?" "Because healing doesn't erase the past," said the voice. "It teaches you how to hold it without falling apart." Ethan covered his face with his hands. "I thought I was done with this." "No one is ever done," the voice replied softly. "You don't outgrow fear. You outgrow believing it has power over you." Ethan let out a shaky laugh. "So it never goes away?" "Would you want it to?" He froze. "What do you mean?" "Fear keeps you awake. It reminds you that you care. You feared losing yourself because you finally found something worth protecting." Ethan sat there in the dark, listening to his heartbeat. Fast, loud, human. He remembered all those sleepless nights, the emptiness that once swallowed him whole. But now that same fear didn't feel like an enemy. It felt honest. "You're saying I need it?" "You need what it teaches you," the night said. "Courage doesn't exist without fear. Peace doesn't exist without the chance to lose it." Ethan took a deep breath and leaned back against the wall. The darkness no longer felt suffocating, just close, familiar, alive. "So this feeling," he whispered, "it's not failure." "It's proof," said the voice. "Proof that you still feel deeply, that you're still alive." Ethan nodded slowly, letting the fear sit beside him instead of fighting it. The air felt heavy as his but calm. The night outside was silent, like it was holding space for him. He whispered, "I thought peace meant never being afraid again." "Peace means being afraid," said the night, "and loving yourself anyway." Ethan closed his eyes, his breath finally slowing. The pounding in his chest softened, the trembling eased. He didn't push the fear away. He didn't chase it. He simply let it exist, and without shame, without judgment. And something magical happened. The fear quieted. Not because it disappeared, but because it had been heard. "You see?" said the night softly. "Even fear just wants to be understood." Ethan smiled in the dark. "You never really leave, do you?" "I can't," said the voice. "Because I am you, even the parts that still tremble." He lay back down, eyes open, watching the faint shimmer of moonlight on the ceiling. "Then I'll stop running," he whispered. "I'll sit with it. I'll listen." "That's all fear ever wanted," said the night. "To be met, not managed." Ethan's eyes grew heavy. His last thought before sleep was simple, powerful, true. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to keep your heart open in its presence. Ethan woke before the sun. No alarm, no urgency, just the soft awareness of being awake. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't make coffee. He didn't even turn on the light. He simply sat, breathing. The air was cool, the room dim, the world half asleep. For a moment, he thought about his usual routine. Reading, writing, walking. But something deeper whispered, "Not today." So he listened. He decided he would spend the whole day in silence. No talking, no reading, no distractions, just stillness. The decision felt simple, yet sacred, like stepping barefoot into a holy place made of time itself. As hours passed, the silence deepened. At first, it was uncomfortable. His thoughts ran wild, filling the room with noise. Did I answer that message? What am I doing tomorrow? Why does quiet feel so loud? The night's voice stirred faintly within him. Because you've never let silence speak before. He smiled softly. Then maybe it's time to listen. He sat on the floor, cross-legged, eyes closed. The minutes stretched, then melted. He felt his heartbeat slow, his breath deepen, his body grow lighter. Thoughts still came. Memories, regrets, random ideas. But he didn't chase them. He just let them drift by, like clouds passing over a still lake. This, said the night quietly, is where truth hides, in the space between thoughts. Ethan listened, not for words, but for presence. And in that stillness, he began to feel something, the quiet rhythm of his breath, the faint hum of life outside, the pulse of the earth beneath his floor. He realized silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything that speech usually drowns out. He whispered under his breath, "I never knew silence could sound like this." "Silence doesn't sound," said the night. "It reveals." Hours passed like minutes. The sun rose, moved, and began to fall again. Ethan hadn't spoken a single word. And yet, he had never felt more connected to everything. He felt the pulse of the universe inside him, the same rhythm that moves the ocean, the wind, the stars. "You're hearing it now," the night whispered softly. "The song beneath the noise, the music of being alive." Ethan smiled faintly. "So this is peace?" "No," said the voice. "This is presence. Peace is what happens when you stop looking for it." As dusk fell, he finally opened his eyes. The room looked exactly the same, but he saw it differently. Every corner, every shadow, every glimmer of fading light, all of it felt sacred. He stood slowly, his body light, his mind still. For the first time, he realized silence wasn't the absence of sound. It was the presence of everything. He whispered almost reverently, "Thank you." "For what?" asked the night. "For teaching me that I don't need to fill every silence to feel alive." The voice smiled through the quiet. "That's the real healing, Ethan. When you stop searching for meanings and start living as one." Outside, the moon rose slowly, full, bright, patient. Ethan sat by the window again, the same place where his journey began. But this time, there were no questions left. No need for words or wisdom or answers, only stillness. And in that stillness, the night hummed softly, a lullaby for the soul that had finally learned how to listen. The envelope had no name, no return address, just his own name, written in delicate handwriting across the front, Ethan. It arrived one quiet morning, tucked between a stack of unread letters and bills. He almost threw it aside, until something about the handwriting made him stop. There was softness in it, hesitation, hope. He opened it carefully, unfolding the paper like a secret. "Dear Ethan, I don't know you. I found your book by accident, or maybe not by accident. I was going to end everything that night. I'd written a note, packed a bag, and decided I was done trying. Then I opened a random page of your book. It said, 'The night doesn't destroy you. It teaches you how to begin again in the dark.' I don't know why, but I stopped. I cried instead. And when I woke up the next morning, I decided to try one more day. That was 2 months ago. I'm still here. I just wanted you to know, the night healed me too. Thank you for surviving so people like me could learn how." The paper shook in his hands. For a long time, Ethan couldn't move. He just sat there, the letter pressed to his chest, his breath uneven. "You see now?" whispered the voice of the night. "Every breath you take sends ripples through someone else's storm." "I didn't even know her," Ethan said softly. "You didn't have to," the voice replied. "Light doesn't need an introduction." He smiled through tears. "She called it my book, but it was never just mine, was it?" "No," said the night. "It was always ours, yours, mine, and every soul that dared to face the dark. Ethan placed the letter beside his notebook. He didn't respond. There was no address, no way to send words back. But something inside him felt whole, as if a missing piece had quietly returned. Later that day, he took a long walk through the park. The air was crisp, the leaves golden, the world humming softly with life. As he walked, he noticed strangers smiling, small acts of kindness unfolding. A man helping a child tie her shoes, a woman leaving coffee for someone asleep on a bench. It hit him then, all these invisible threads connecting lives, each act a quiet echo of another. "This is what healing looks like," said the night gently. Not loud, not grand, just one heart reminding another to keep beating. Ethan whispered, "So that letter wasn't from a stranger?" "No," the voice replied. "It was from you. From the part of you that once needed saving, now writing back to say thank you." He stopped beneath a tree, sunlight breaking through the branches. The breeze felt alive against his skin. He closed his eyes and said softly, "If my pain became her light, then maybe every scar has a purpose." "Exactly," said the night. "Scars aren't proof that you were broken. They're proof that you healed and left the door open for someone else to follow." Ethan smiled, looking up at the sky. A sky both bright and infinite. "Then I'll keep that door open," he whispered. "For every stranger who's still searching for a way through their night." The wind moved gently, carrying his words away, not lost, but traveling from heart to heart, from silence to hope, like a letter without an address, finding exactly where it needed to go. It began with just 5 chairs, a quiet room, dimly lit, with candles flickering along the walls. Ethan had rented a small studio downtown. Nothing fancy, just enough space for people to sit, breathe, and be. On the door, a handwritten sign read, "The Healing Circle. No judgment, no advice, only listening." When the first night came, Ethan wasn't sure if anyone would show up. But one by one they did. A woman in her 40s, eyes tired but kind. A young man barely 20, his hands shaking. A middle-aged teacher, a widow, and a quiet teenager wearing headphones. 5 strangers, 5 different stories, one shared silence. Ethan sat down with them, the circle complete. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air was heavy, not with tension, but with truth waiting to be told. Finally, the woman whispered, "I lost my son last year. Everyone tells me to move on, but I don't even know what that means anymore." Her voice cracked. The young man across from her looked up and said softly, "My brother's still alive, but he doesn't talk to me. I think that hurts just as much." One by one, they began to speak. Not to fix each other, just to be heard. Ethan didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice. He just listened. The night's voice whispered inside him, "This is how healing travels, through honesty, through silence shared between souls." The widow spoke next. "I used to think grief was something you overcome. Now I think it's something you learn to carry." Ethan nodded gently. "That's exactly it. Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering differently." The teenager finally removed her headphones. "I didn't think adults felt like this," she said quietly. "I thought it was just me." Everyone smiled softly, not with pity, but recognition. Ethan said, "It's never just you. That's why we're here." The candles flickered, their light dancing across tear-streaked faces. The room was heavy with emotion, but not sadness, release. For the first time, everyone in that circle realized they weren't alone. Hours passed without notice. When the session ended, no one rushed to leave. They sat in the quiet, breathing the same air, their hearts lighter, their pain somehow shared and softened. As the last person left, Ethan stayed behind, blowing out the candles one by one. The night's voice whispered, "You've created what you once needed, a place where people can exist without pretending. Ethan smiled. So this is what purpose feels like. Purpose, said the voice, isn't a goal. It's a space you hold for others when they forget who they are. Ethan turned off the lights and looked back at the empty circle of chairs. Funny, he said softly, how healing looks so much like sitting together in silence. Because that's what love looks like too, the voice replied. He locked the door and stepped outside. The moon was bright, not watching over him but walking beside him. In that moment, Ethan knew. Healing wasn't something you finish. It was something you share. It had been months since Ethan last heard it. That familiar voice that once guided him through the dark. He thought it was gone. Or maybe he'd simply become too quiet to notice. But that night, as rain whispered against the window, the voice returned. Not loud, not sudden, just a soft hum within his chest. You've done well, it said. Ethan smiled. You came back. I never left, the night replied. You just stopped needing words. He laughed softly, leaning back in his chair. It's strange. For so long I needed your voice to survive, and now I feel like I'm living for the first time. That's because you finally learned to listen without sound, the voice said. Ethan closed his eyes. I missed you. You missed yourself, said the night gently. And now you've found you again. The room glowed faintly from the lamplight. Outside, the rain thickened, each drop falling like tiny blessings from the sky. Why tonight? Ethan asked. Why come back now? Because tonight your heart is quiet enough to hear truth again, the voice replied. And what truth is that? That your journey was never about light defeating darkness. It was about remembering they were always one. Ethan's breath caught. So there was never a battle? Only misunderstanding, said the voice. You spent years fighting what you were meant to embrace. He smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. I fought the night because I thought it was trying to hurt me. And now I see it was trying to hold me. The room fell into silence, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with something sacred, something beyond words. The air shimmered softly, like time itself had stopped to listen. Ethan, said the voice, look at your reflection. He turned toward the window. His reflection looked back, older, calmer, whole. But something else was there too, a faint, silvery glow behind his eyes. What is that? He whispered. It's me, said the night. The part of you that never left, never dimmed, never doubted. The quiet that watched over you while you learned to trust yourself again. Ethan smiled. So you were me all along. Always, said the voice. But you needed to walk far enough in the dark to believe in the light. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle. A distant thunder rolled like a deep sigh across the sky. What now? Ethan asked. What comes after peace? More peace, said the voice with a soft laugh. But shared this time, not kept. He leaned forward, resting his head against the window pane. The glass was cool, grounding. So this isn't the end of the journey? No, said the night. It's the continuation. Healing isn't a line, Ethan. It's a circle. You'll teach, you'll fall, you'll rise, you'll listen. Again and again. Ethan nodded slowly, eyes heavy with gratitude. Then I'll keep walking. Good, the voice said softly. Because the world still needs your silence. Ethan smiled, whispering, I'll be here. I know, said the night. You always were. Outside, the rain stopped completely. The clouds parted, revealing a sky washed clean, moonlight spilling over the city like forgiveness. Ethan whispered, Welcome back. And from deep within, the night answered, Welcome home. It was a cold evening, the kind that made the air taste like silence. Ethan was closing the doors of the small studio when he saw a boy, maybe 17, standing outside, his shoulders hunched, eyes red. "Are you here for the circle?" Ethan asked softly. The boy shook his head. "No, I don't know where else to go." Ethan nodded. "Then you came to the right place." They sat inside across from each other, two souls separated by years, connected by pain. For a while, the boy said nothing. He just stared at his hands, trembling slightly. Then, in a low voice, he said, "I broke something I can't fix." Ethan didn't ask what. He didn't need to. "Everyone says I'm worthless," the boy continued. "They're right. I look in the mirror and I hate what I see." He laughed bitterly, eyes wet. "You wrote that book, right? The one about healing? Well, I think I'm too broken for that." Ethan leaned forward. His voice was calm, like a whisper from the dark. "Can I tell you something?" The boy nodded. "Do you know what happens when a mirror breaks?" Ethan asked. "You throw it away," the boy said. Ethan smiled gently. "No, you just stop expecting it to show you one image." The boy frowned. "I don't understand." "When you look into a broken mirror," Ethan said softly, "you see yourself in pieces. But that doesn't mean you've disappeared. It means you're too much for one reflection to hold." The boy blinked, silent. "You think you destroyed something?" Ethan continued. "But sometimes breaking is how light gets in." The boy's lip trembled. "It doesn't feel that way." "I know," Ethan said. "It never does at first. But every scar, every crack, every shattered piece, they don't erase your beauty. They reveal it." The boy's eyes filled again, this time with something softer. Not pain, but recognition. "You really think I can change?" he whispered. Ethan smiled. "You already have. The moment you walked through that door, you stopped running from yourself." The boy wiped his face, breathing shakily. "It's just, I don't think I deserve peace." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then let it find you anyway." "What if I mess up again?" "You will," Ethan said gently. "We all do. Healing isn't about staying unbroken. It's about staying kind, even to the parts that fall apart again." The boy looked up, and for the first time that night, his eyes held light. "You sound like you've been through this." Ethan smiled. "I'm still going through it." They sat in silence after that. Not awkward, not heavy, just quiet understanding. Before leaving, the boy turned to him. "Thank you," he said, "for not trying to fix me." Ethan shook his head. "You were never broken. You just forgot where your light was." The boy smiled faintly and stepped into the night. Ethan stood by the window, watching him disappear into the soft glow of streetlights. The voice of the night spoke quietly from within. "You did for him what I did for you." Ethan whispered, "You mean I became the night?" "No," said the voice. "You remembered that you always were." Ethan smiled, his reflection faintly visible in the glass. It wasn't perfect. It was cracked, but shining. And for the first time, he realized, he didn't need to fix the mirror anymore. He just needed to see the light inside it. The air smelled of rain and earth. The river stretched endlessly before him, calm, patient, alive. Ethan sat on a smooth rock by the bank, shoes off, toes grazing the cold current. The world felt slower here, like time itself paused to breathe. He hadn't planned to come. One morning, his heart had simply whispered, "Go." And so he did. No destination, no reason, just a pull, soft and wordless, guiding him toward the sound of water. The river was wide and silver, reflecting the clouds like a moving mirror. Birds drifted overhead, the air thick with quiet freedom. Ethan closed his eyes, the sound of the current wrapped around him, steady, constant, eternal. "You found it," the night's voice murmured from within. Found what? Ethan whispered. Your reflection in motion. He smiled faintly. You mean the river? No, said the voice. I mean you. Ethan opened his eyes, watching the water twist and shimmer. I used to think life was something I had to control, he said. Now I see it's something I have to flow with. Exactly, said the knight. Even rivers know when to bend. You only break when you forget how to move. Ethan picked up a small stone and threw it into the current. The ripples spread outward, delicate, infinite. So this is what healing looks like, he whispered, not stopping the river, but trusting where it's going. Yes, the voice said, and remembering that you are both, the river that flows and the shore that watches. He watched as the ripples disappeared into the distance. Funny, Ethan said. I used to be terrified of change. Change was never the enemy, said the knight. Resistance was. A breeze swept through, cool and full of life. It carried the scent of moss and mist, the sound of water touching stone. Ethan lay back on the grass, looking at the sky. The clouds drifted slowly, like thoughts that didn't need holding on to. He felt small, but not insignificant. You know, he whispered, I think the river forgives everything. It doesn't need to, the knight replied. It just keeps moving. That's its forgiveness. Ethan smiled. Then maybe I've been trying too hard to fix what was meant to flow. That's what most people do, the voice said gently. They damn their hearts with guilt when all they needed to do was let the water run. Ethan closed his eyes again. The sound of the current grew louder, as if the river itself was breathing with him. For the first time in years, he felt completely weightless. Do you know what peace really is, Ethan? The voice asked. What? It's when you stop asking the river to be still. He laughed quietly, tears slipping down the sides of his face. Then I'll stop asking, he whispered. The wind brushed against his hair, the current hummed softly, and for a long time there was no separation, no Ethan, no night, no river, only flow. When he finally opened his eyes, the sky was gold, the water gleamed like glass, and in that endless motion he saw himself, not as a man who survived the night, but as part of everything that never stops moving. The world was quiet when Ethan returned to the city. The air smelled like rain and concrete, and the streets shimmered faintly under the glow of streetlights. Everything felt both familiar and new, as if he had stepped into the same world, but now could see the invisible lines connecting everything. The laughter of children, the hum of traffic, the rustle of wind between buildings. All of it felt like one song, a song he had been too broken to hear before. He stopped near a bridge that arched over the river, the same river he had visited just days ago. The water below moved with quiet power, reflecting the city lights like scattered stars. Ethan leaned on the railing, his reflection rippling below. For a long time, he just watched. Then softly, the knight spoke again. Do you see it? The river? Ethan asked. The bridge. What about it? It stands between two sides, never belonging to one, yet connecting both. Ethan nodded slowly. Like me, exactly, said the voice. You are the bridge, between the world of pain and the world of peace, between being human and being eternal. He smiled faintly. So I was never meant to choose between light and dark. No, the knight said softly. You were meant to hold both and show others that they can exist together. Ethan's heart swelled, not with pride, but with understanding. I used to think I had to leave the world to find peace, he whispered. And now I know peace was meant to be brought into the world. The rain began to fall, slow, soft drops that blurred the reflections on the river. Ethan didn't move. He let the water soak into his hair, his clothes, his skin. He felt alive, beautifully, painfully alive. "What if I fail?" he asked. "You will," said the knight simply. "But failure isn't falling. It's forgetting that you can stand again." Ethan chuckled softly. "You always know what to say." "No," the voice said gently. "You do. I just remind you." The bridge trembled slightly as a train passed in the distance, its light streaking across the horizon like a heartbeat. "The bridge doesn't move," Ethan said. "It just holds space." "Exactly," the knight replied. "You don't need to fix the world and just hold space for it to heal." Ethan closed his eyes. In that moment, he could feel everything: the rain, the river, the sound of footsteps, and the quiet pulse of life beneath it all. There was no separation. The city was breathing through him, and he was breathing through the city. "You've crossed the bridge," the knight whispered. "Now be the bridge." Ethan opened his eyes, the world shining wet and real. "So that's my purpose," he said. "To connect what people think is separate." "Yes," said the voice. "To remind them that heaven was never above, it was always within." The rain stopped as suddenly as it began. The river below shimmered again, and for a brief second, Ethan's reflection looked different. Brighter, stiller, endless. He smiled at it and whispered, "You and I aren't two anymore." The knight's voice faded softly into him. "We never were." Ethan sat on the rooftop of his apartment building, a cup of tea growing cold beside him, the city glittering below like 1,000 scattered dreams. The night sky was clear, quiet, endless. The same sky he had once screamed at, begging for answers. Now he just looked at it and smiled. "You used to hate me," the knight's voice said softly. Ethan laughed under his breath. "I did. I blamed you for everything. And now I realize you were never punishing me. You were preparing me." "For what?" asked the voice gently. "For myself," Ethan said. "For the life I was meant to live." The wind brushed against his face, carrying that familiar hum of stillness that always came before truth. "You know," Ethan continued, "there were nights I wished I could erase everything. The pain, the loss, the loneliness. But if I had, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't understand compassion. I wouldn't know what it means to truly see someone." "That's the gift," said the knight softly. "Not the light, but what the darkness taught you to see." Ethan closed his eyes, breathing deeply. "It hurts so much. Sometimes I still feel it." "Pain doesn't leave," the voice said. "It just changes shape, from suffering to wisdom." Ethan's eyes glistened. "So all this time you weren't my enemy?" "No," the knight whispered. "I was your teacher, and you, my lesson." He smiled faintly, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Then I guess, thank you." "For what?" "For breaking me in all the right places." The wind stirred softly, as if the night itself exhaled in relief. "You always saw pain as punishment," said the voice. "But what if every wound was a door? What if every heartbreak was how I entered you?" Ethan looked up, eyes shining. "Then every scar is sacred." "Exactly," said the knight. "You were never broken. You were being opened." Silence followed, but it was a silence full of warmth. The stars seemed closer now, the moon softer, the air filled with an invisible tenderness. "So that's your gift," Ethan said. "You didn't save me. You shaped me." "And you shaped me," replied the knight. "Through your eyes, I became something more than darkness." He laughed softly. "So we saved each other?" "Always," said the voice. That's how light and dark survive, by learning to hold hands. Ethan leaned back, looking at the vast, endless sky. The pain that once defined him now felt like music, distant, low, beautiful. He whispered, "I used to think the night took everything from me. And now?" Ethan smiled. "Now I see you gave it all back, only in a different form." The wind carried his words upward, and for the first time, the night itself seemed to whisper back with gratitude. "And that, my son, is love." The world had changed, not in noise or color, but in awareness. Ethan could feel it. Wherever he went, people looked lighter, softer, more awake. His book had found its way into countless hands. People read it on trains, in hospitals, in quiet corners of lonely nights. But it wasn't the fame that mattered. It was the silence that followed after they finished reading. That sacred moment when a heart whispered, "Maybe I can begin again too." One morning, Ethan received a video message from a young woman. She spoke quietly, sitting beside her window. "Your book saved me when I thought I was invisible," she said. "Now I read it to the kids I teach. We start every morning by sitting in silence, 1 minute of peace before chaos begins." She smiled through tears. "They call it nighttime at sunrise?" Ethan laughed softly, eyes wet. "Nighttime at sunrise," he repeated. "Beautiful." A few days later, he attended a small gathering. Readers who had built a community called Echo Lights. It wasn't a club. It was a promise to live gently, to listen deeply, to carry quiet light wherever they went. Ethan stood among them silently, watching. They didn't even notice him. They just talked, shared, healed, without knowing the man who started it all was standing beside them. He didn't need to speak. He didn't need to be known, because this was his legacy, not the sound of his name, but the echo of his silence living in others. "Do you see what's happening?" whispered the night from within. Ethan nodded. "They've become the light." "No," said the voice. "They've always been. You just help them remember." He smiled, watching a young man comfort another who was crying. "It's like I'm watching my own story repeat, but softer." "That's what healing does," said the night. It doesn't end. It travels, from one open heart to another. Ethan felt something stir inside him, a quiet peace that wasn't his alone anymore. It was collective, shared, eternal. "I think," he whispered, "you were right all along. The night wasn't meant to be survived. It was meant to be passed on." "Exactly," said the voice. "You were never the end of the story, Ethan. You were the beginning of someone else's dawn." The sun began to rise outside, golden light spilling through windows, touching every face, every tear, every smile. Ethan stood still, feeling the warmth on his skin. For the first time, he didn't need to close his eyes to hear the night. The voice was no longer separate. It was in the laughter, the silence, the wind, the light. "Your voice," said the night, "was never mine. It was always the world's way of remembering itself." Ethan whispered, "Then I don't need to speak anymore." "No," the voice said lovingly, "because now the world speaks for you." Ethan smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. He looked at the people around him, every soul that once felt lost, now carrying light for someone else. The night whispered one last time that morning, "This is how eternity sounds, not as thunder, but as 1,000 whispers of peace." The night was quiet, the kind of silence that hums with meaning. Ethan sat by his window, the same one where his story had begun years ago. Outside, the city slept under a silver moon. The world looked peaceful, like it finally understood itself. He ran his fingers along the spine of his old book. The night will heal you. The pages were worn, corners bent, the ink slightly faded. It felt alive. I never thought it would end like this, he whispered. Why should it end at all? Came the familiar voice. Ethan smiled. You always know when I'm ready. I don't know, said the knight softly. I listen. So this is it, Ethan said. The final lesson? No lessons tonight, the voice replied. Just remembering. Ethan nodded, breathing in the cool air. I remember everything. The fear, the silence, the tears, the hope. You were there for all of it. So were you, said the knight. We walked together through light and shadow. He looked up at the moon. I used to think you were something outside me. And now? Ethan smiled. Now I know you were always me. That's the circle, Ethan, the knight said. The student becomes the teacher. The wound becomes the light. Silence stretched between them, but it was full, rich, sacred. Ethan whispered, So all this time I wasn't healing from you. I was healing into you. Exactly, said the knight gently. Healing never takes you away from your darkness. It teaches you how to carry it with grace. He laughed quietly. You sound softer now. I don't need to be loud anymore. You finally learned to listen to whispers. Ethan closed his eyes. It feels strange, knowing there's nothing left to fix. There never was, said the knight. Only things to understand. He let out a long breath, the kind that feels like surrender, not defeat. I'm not afraid anymore. Of what? Of the dark, of the quiet, of myself. Then the circle is complete, the knight whispered. The air shimmered faintly. The moonlight seemed to glow brighter, not around him, but from within him. Ethan felt it, the merging, the separation between himself and the voice dissolving into something infinite. There was no Ethan and the night anymore. Just presence, just peace, just being. So what happens now? He asked softly. Now, said the voice in his voice, you rest. Not because you're tired, but because you've arrived. He smiled, eyes glistening. And the world? It will keep turning, said the voice. It will forget, then remember, just as you did. The circle will continue, because it always does. Ethan whispered, I think I finally understand what forever means. It doesn't mean never ending, said the voice. It means always returning. A single tear rolled down his cheek, not from sadness, but gratitude. The night was silent now. The moon hung still. The world breathed softly, and in that breath, Ethan disappeared, not gone, but expanded. The night didn't end. It became him. The morning came slowly, the kind that didn't belong to time. Light spread across the horizon, gentle as breath. It moved through the city, through the windows, through walls, until it reached the small room where Ethan once lived. The chair was empty. The cup of tea from the night before still half full. But the air was different. It shimmered. Like something invisible and infinite was still there, waiting, breathing, being. Outside, the world moved on as always. Footsteps, laughter, the hum of morning life. But those who passed that window sometimes paused. They'd feel something, a calm, a warmth, a silence that felt alive. No one could explain it. No one needed to, because Ethan had never really left. He had become everything he had ever sought, not the man who healed, but the light that taught others how to remember their own healing. You see now, whispered the night, or maybe it was the wind, or maybe it was him. You were never separate. You were always part of the infinite light, and somewhere beyond words, beyond thought, beyond form, Ethan answered. I know. He was the river and the sky, the echo and the silence. The student and the teacher, the night and the dawn. His story wasn't ending, it was expanding. Every heart that healed because of his words carried a spark of him. Every quiet soul that found peace in darkness was his continuation. The night will heal you, his voice whispered through the world. Because the night was never meant to end. It was meant to become you. The light outside grew brighter. Not the light of the sun, but of something deeper, eternal. A light that didn't blind but embraced. A light that didn't speak but understood. The infinite light. It moved through the world quietly, through pages, through memories, through hearts, until it reached the places that had forgotten how to shine. And every time someone whispered his words, every time a lost soul found comfort in the dark, the circle began again. For light never truly leaves the night. It only learns how to glow from within it. The story was over, but its meaning had just begun. The night did not end. It became him, and he became everything.